सेव किया था ना?
मैं सिर्फ इसलिए गया था क्योंकि उसने मुझे कॉल किया, that's it. But listen तो.
Save it for someone else.
जिंदगी में सेव करना जरूरी है, मगर जब बात पैसों की हो, सिर्फ सेविंग से काम नहीं चलेगा। इक्विटी म्यूचुअल फंड्स में इन्वेस्ट कीजिए और अपने सेविंग्स को आगे बढ़ने का मौका दीजिए।
Mutual fund investments are subject to market risks. Read all scheme-related documents carefully.
Since you know very well how seriously we take politics, not just in India but across the world, I am sure that expectation might be today that we'll talk about Brazil, because now the final runoff of the election has taken place and President Lula has come back for a third term, defeating the colorful right-wing strongman figure of Jair Bolsonaro. But today we are not talking about Brazil. One, because this is a runoff and runoff was on expected lines. We haven't seen a surprise there. And second, as far as the politics of Brazil and that part of the world, that is Latin and Southern America, even a little bit of Central America is concerned, we had talked about it in an episode of Cut The Clutter about a month back when the first round of the Brazilian election took place. So I will share a link with you. You can see that. Today, on the other hand, we have something very interesting. We have a lot of data and a lot of arguments and a new debate coming up on just how strong China is economically right now. Because China's dream of leaving America behind and becoming the number one economy in the world by nominal GDP, is that going to be realized? In 2010, people were saying this might happen in PPP terms by 2014-15 and in nominal terms, that is absolute GDP, by 2020. It hasn't happened yet. At this point, it's about 1/3 less than America, and now a lot of the data or lack of data, more than data, lack of data, and the debate around lack of data that's emerging, that tells us that this may not happen for a long time. China may not overtake America. That means China may not grow so much as it did in the past and may not become such a big economy as might have been imagined. And in fact, there are some arguments that one, it may not become bigger than America by 2061. Forget in the third term of Xi Jinping, which is 5 more years. And second, possibly, it may never in the foreseeable future, even beyond 2060, become a bigger economy than America. So these are big things. And as we talk about that, then we'll also talk about a little bit in the passing on the strongman government model and the data denial obsession. Why do strongman governments dislike or fear data so much? So we'll give you some evidence towards the end. So as we get into China's economy and what's going to happen and what is the situation right now, the status, let me also mention a little bit about our own economic health, that is at ThePrint. Now you know ThePrint well, you are familiar with it. You know we are neither left nor right? We are neither hyphenated to the left nor hyphenated with the right. Are we in the center? In a way, yes, but we are not centrists to the extent that we are not neutral. We always take a position on every story, on every issue. You will never, we are not bots. We are human beings with minds and opinions, so we take positions. So our positions can sometimes upset the left, sometimes upset the right. So if the left thinks we are right and the right thinks we are left, the answer is we must be doing something right. Now for us to be in this place, one more challenge comes in. If you're on the left, then there's a huge ecosystem around the left that will support you, that will pay for your journalism, that will pay for your reporters to travel, etc., and raise the questions that they want raised. If you are hyphenated on the right, then the right maybe has an even bigger ecosystem, or maybe they can argue amongst themselves and figure out who has a bigger ecosystem. It's not our place to get there, but they will support that ecosystem. But those of us who try and do unhyphenated journalism, we need support from good people like you. Unless good, smart, thinking people like you support unhyphenated journalism, there is no future for us because we don't have the support of the partisan. We cannot count on the support of the partisan on the left or the right because we are not partisans. That is why my periodic reminder to you, if you've taken a subscription already, please renew it. And I will show you on my screen how you can do it. It's very simple. It will not take you more than a couple of seconds. And if you haven't taken a subscription, please take it because you need good, clean, unhyphenated journalism. Please pay for it. It will be important for you and also for your coming generations. Having said that, back to China now, back to the issue we are talking about. So on China, a bunch of things have come out. Xi Jinping has just got his third term. And what's happened in China is, and this is classical strongman approach to governance. As Xi Jinping has become stronger, the availability of data in China, particularly economic data, has become less and less and less. And now it's become so little that at this moment, they've even suspended the release of their previous quarter's GDP growth figures. Now that is saying something. You know why? Because when big regimes, powerful regimes, why does any regime, any government not like to release data? They only, if the data is great, they'd love to release it, right? They love to release it. They will also pay people for publishing it, at least those media organizations who are friendly with them or those that they want to support, right? They will even pay them, take out those full page ads, multi-page ads, center spread saying, oh, wow, we've done so well. It is only when data is not telling a good story that they want to hold data back. So there are two articles, both from Financial Times that I am quoting from this time, and I am sharing links for both articles. So the first is John Murdoch, who is a data journalist and columnist at Financial Times. You might remember that we used to quote often from his data and his calculations and projections in the bad days, in the toughest days of COVID. He had the best data. So one is an article from him. The other, another familiar byline, that is Ruchir Sharma. Now two articles, but first let's talk about what John Murdoch is saying. John Murdoch is saying that in 2012, in fact those are his opening lines, in 2012, if you went to the Chinese National Bureau of Statistics in Beijing, this was his words, a cornucopia of data. That means fantastic data. You just loved it. So data was actually divided in 80,000 different series, and a lot of it was very exotic stuff, he says, including something like electricity availability, say, in Inner Mongolia, or people employed in outdoor amusement equipment sector. In 2012, it is that Xi Jinping got his first term, and since then, this data has been disappearing in the sense that more and more heads under which data was provided has been disappearing. And he says, look, a lot of his disappeared within 1 year. Within 1 year of Xi Jinping's coming to power, most of this data disappeared, a lot of it disappeared, and what remained, half of that also disappeared after 2016. 2016 is when he's on the verge of getting his second term. So that is when, of whatever remained of the original data sets or databases or data series, another half of those series disappeared. So in a country which used to give you so much data along so many indicators, suddenly just a fraction of that was available. Now there's a chart that John Murdoch's article carries. We can't carry that chart, but I'll give you an idea of what that chart is saying. That chart is saying that under the following heads, that is industrial production, construction, business and consumer surveys, demographics and labor, investments, transport and communication, and monetary indicators. Under all these heads, that is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 heads. Data has not been updated since 2020 under the first 6 heads, that is industrial production, construction, business and consumer surveys, demographics and labor, investment, transport and communication. All 6 data has not been updated for the past 2 years since 2020, and 2022 is now ending. And under the 7th head, which is monetary indicators, this has not been updated since 2019. Now, if you see the general drift of this data until data was available, you can see that Xi Jinping has taken over power in 2012. He's taken over power at a time when Chinese economy is still rising. So it rises a little bit. Look at industrial production. And suddenly it's been falling. So every economic indicator in Xi Jinping Raj has been declining. Spell that in capital letters. Every economic indicator in Xi Jinping Raj has been declining for the past 10 years. And maybe now a stage has come where he does not want this to become public, because after a while it becomes a kind of family embarrassment. So why share it with the rest of the world? It is on top of this that Xi Jinping's government has now decided to indefinitely delay headline third quarter indicators, as we just told you, including GDP indicators, so industrial growth, GDP, etc., etc. All that for last quarter hasn't come out. Think about it in India. We fret over the absence of a lot of data not being available. And to be fair, towards the conclusion, I will list all the areas in which data has increasingly begun to get unavailable in India under our own strongman government, right? Because strongman governments have a template, and one essential element in that template is don't give people too much data, because data maybe confuses people, or maybe data makes people think too much, or maybe data makes people analyze facts and ask you questions that you find uncomfortable or inconvenient. So in fairness, I will mention those areas in India as well towards the conclusion. So stay with me. Now, third quarter data, vital indices of the economy, including GDP in China, have been held back. And John Murdoch says that, look, it's been shut off. And as we had explained earlier on in this episode, rulers do it when they don't want people to get the news. When do governments want to shut down the flow of news? When news is bad. When news is good, why should they shut it down? They'll get on top of the pulpits and be screaming. They will get on top of the pulpits, pick up the loudest of the loudspeakers and push it through your eardrums until it hurts. But if it doesn't look good, then they hold it back. Now, what happens in China is, because a lot of this data used to come out, now all this data was not authentic and not accurate. There's been a lot of doubt about the Chinese data. But when you get a lot of data, it is a lot of data. So you can apply correctives, you can cross-check one with the other, balance one with the other, and arrive at some conclusions, thereby also question China's larger claims on the economy. John Murdoch in this article quotes from Louis Martinez, who is a professor at University of Chicago, who does night light intensity from satellite imagery, who uses the technique of night light intensity from satellite imagery to check out what's happening to an economy, right? We get a lot of those pictures now in India as well, to see the more lights, the more activity, etc., etc. Satellites are smart now. They can tell you a lot. Using that imagery, Louis Martinez of University of Chicago has concluded that over the past 20 years, while China's economy has grown at a very rapid pace, and for a large economy of China's size to grow at that rapid pace means a lot, its actual GDP growth is 1/3 less, 1/3, 1/3 less than what the Chinese have been claiming. Generally, this would mean if the Chinese claim that, look, I grew by 15%, they have grown by 10%. Again, a lot of growth, but a 1/3 less, about 33% less than what the Chinese are claiming, 33% over the base that the Chinese are claiming. This analysis has come from Louis Martinez of University of Chicago using nighttime light intensity from satellite imagery. Now, if you use this, then you would know that China's economy today is significantly smaller than America's. So this idea, and this is something that Ruchir analyzes more precisely in his article, that China's economy, a lot of people said that, oh, PPP, China has already left America behind. Now, PPP is a dodgy indicator. Right now, what is precise is nominal. In nominal terms, if these reassessments of Chinese economic growth over the past 20 years are right, then China's economy today is considerably slower than the US. Again, the next set of data that John Murdoch has produced, it says that also it's quite evident the Chinese haven't quite managed their COVID crisis as well as the rest. Initially, they managed it very well. Maybe they knew it earlier that COVID was coming in, and they only told the rest of the world much later. And in any case, they had WHO tell the rest of the world, even 7 weeks after the first cases had surfaced in China, that this virus could not be translated from human to human. So maybe they had an early head start. So they managed their first wave very well. But by the second wave, they had a disaster. And right now they are looking bad. So John Byrne Murdoch has a graphic in his article. Please read the article, which gives you the graphs of how various developed countries vis-a-vis China have controlled their economies, or have managed, control is a bad word, have managed their economy in the overall COVID wave. And if you see this graphic as France, US, UK, Japan, and China, you can see that the Chinese have done really badly in the second wave. And there can be many reasons for this. One reason, obviously, is that the Chinese vaccine, the vaccine that they developed at home, is obviously very inadequate. Now there's a lot of scientific data coming up, which is suggesting that this is not effective at a rate of more than 50-55%. That is not good enough, right? But the Chinese also insisted on not allowing any foreign vaccine to come in. Now, India produced Covaxin, but India also knew that Covaxin takes a lot of time producing, and enough numbers would not be available. So India opened up not to Pfizer, not to Moderna, because these were seen as profit-making MNCs, but to Covishield. Now, Covishield was produced by a publicly funded project, a bunch of scientists at Oxford University, who gave the science to AstraZeneca, the pharma company, which waived off the patents, and they allowed Serum Institute in India to produce a very large number of copies of Covishield. That's the vaccine that most of us have in our arms. Now, the Chinese insisted that they will have only their own vaccine. And if you see all this crisis in China now, see these visuals. People breaking out of this Foxconn factory where they were locked up because of China's zero COVID policy. They broke through the factory fences. They came out, and you can see them now as in end of October 2022, walking home in groups, maybe 150, 200 kilometers, in a scene not very unfamiliar to those of us who saw workers in India and walking back home in the first wave of the pandemic with our sudden and shock lockdown. And remember, China is a country with almost 6 times the per capita GDP that India has. So a much richer country also is having the same problem. Why? Not because it doesn't have the resources or its people are poor. These people have good salaried jobs. They are not even daily wage paid laborers, most of whom constituted the groups that walked back in India. These are in organized sectors in a tech company. That's because they've had this mismanagement of the COVID situation, which has come, one, from the inadequacy of their homemade vaccine. It simply isn't good enough. Not enough people have faith in it. A lot of the Chinese have not taken the vaccine. They've declined to take the vaccine. And in fact, all data tells you that more than 20%, that is more than 1 in 5 of the Chinese population above the age of 80 has not taken this vaccine. Obviously, they don't trust the vaccine. In America, on the other hand, the other country where this nuttiness reigns, this anti-vaxxer nuttiness reigns, the number of those above the age of 80 who have not taken the vaccine is only 7%. In Europe, it's almost nothing. I think in India also, it's almost nothing. In fact, we Indians, if anything, have been very, very modern and very, very open-minded about taking the vaccines. In China, that hasn't quite happened. Now, John Byrne Murdoch concludes that by looking at data that's available to him from previous Chinese GDP figures, plus The Economist, plus Federal Reserve Bank of New York, and from flight tracking site Airportia. I'm sure some of you have tracked it when you want to know whether a plane is late or on time, or when somebody you are waiting for particularly from overseas, where has the plane reached. So Airportia is one of those sites. I also track it sometimes. But these sites can also give you an idea of how a country's commerce and economy are going. So he says, if I add all of these up, then I would estimate China's third quarter growth figure to be 3%. 3%. And he says, if I see it again through the prism of Louis Martinez's test, that is the satellite data, satellite light intensity data, then I would say about 2.7%. So that looks like possibly the Chinese growth for the previous quarter. And there is no evidence that it's going to get better. It might get worse, in fact, in the subsequent quarters. That is all the data, that is all the data or all other indicators that are coming in from China telling you. That's all of the indicators coming in are telling you, particularly because a lot of the data is not available. Because if the news was not bad, data would be available. So it's in this picture that Ruchir Sharma also says that it's unlikely that Xi Jinping will achieve in his third term. It's most unlikely that in his third term, China will become a mid-level developed country, because for that, China has to grow at least 5% in the next 5 years. That, he says, is a near impossibility if you look at all the situations right now. And he says, if you take the combination of three figures, that is bad demographics, Chinese are getting old, they are not producing more babies, and I've said this again and I'll repeat it now, that you can use brute state power to stop people from producing babies. Right? You can say one and no more. If one more, then I will send you to a labor camp or some place even worse than that. But you cannot produce people to produce more babies, right? That you cannot do. You cannot put a gun on somebody's head and say, hey, छोटे भाई, छोटी बहन, बच्चे पैदा करो, right? ऐसे नहीं होता है. So the Chinese now are refusing to produce more babies. So the RSS chief, Mohan Bhagwat, in his Dashera address had said, in fact, he'd used a line, चीन अभी बुढ़ा हो चुका है. बुढ़ा नहीं हुआ, चीन में बहुत दम है अभी, लेकिन फिर भी, but still, China is not that old yet, but China still has an average age of about 38. 38 is at least early middle age now. India in comparison today is about 28, again because in India, population growth has been leveling off very fast. But you can also see countries where population growth is not leveling off, say Pakistan, it's 23. I'm just giving you these reference points so you can make a mental note of who belongs where. So the average age of 38, older people in China are increasing. And that one denominator, which is called dependency ratio, that is the percentage of people who are earning or who are building the economy or who are contributing to the economy, their percentage to people who are dependent on them. So as any population grows older, dependency ratio rises. So China is in that situation. So combination of three factors. One, bad demographics, what they are, I just explained to you. Second, heavy debt. China is a country in a heavy debt. China at this moment, if you take state debt, household debt, all debts, corporate debt, all of it comes to about 275% of China's GDP. That in a weaker economy would be a complete disaster. But the Chinese don't have a weak economy, so they are managing. And I will tell you relatively what this means, quoting from Ruchir's article. So second is heavy debt. What the Chinese have done is, since 2010, when it looked like they can't sustain the same double-digit growth rates, they started pumping a lot of money in the economy, and that came in as debt. And that has now piled up. And debt, when debt piles up beyond a point, it becomes as ugly as those garbage mountains that we see on the outskirts of Delhi and feel so embarrassed about Bhalaswa and Ghazipur. Because all these debt, this smells very bad. What do you do with it? You have to pay it back. Somebody will pay it back. So excessive debt becomes a big burden on your backs. So first, bad demographics. Second, heavy debt. And third, declining productivity. So what's happening in China is, one, because wages are going up, as average incomes go up, wages go up. Second, a lot of infrastructure has been built, a lot of debt has been taken, debt is causing interest, people are getting older, Chinese workers are getting older workers cost more, newer workers are not coming in. All of that is leading to a decline in productivity. So how does growth take place? Growth takes place when you have more workers who use more capital more productively, right? It doesn't happen because you give more money to the same people, to the same 50 years old, 60 years old, 70-year-olds. No disrespect to older people. But productivity for a booming economy has to come from a fresh supply of younger people. And the difference, say, between China and the US in this sense is that the US, because it allows and encourages so much immigration will always get fresh supplies of young people and young population, even if its own people don't produce that many babies. The Chinese, on the other hand, are stuck. One, they are stuck with their own idea of ethnic uniformity, homogeneity, one country, one leader, one politics, one party, one language, one etc., etc., etc. And that's why even the Uyghurs and Tibetans also have to have Sinicized names now. With that, you cannot encourage immigration from outside, right? And that is also a burden for the Chinese. So in this situation, Ruchir estimates that China cannot grow at more than 2.5% going ahead, if at all. So if China grows at 2.5% and the US keeps growing at 1.5%, there is no way the Chinese can overtake the American economy even by 2060. And who knows, because America is also getting a fresh supply of human resources all the time through immigration. Who knows, they may never be able to do that. So this is where a lot of equations have to be rewritten. So Ruchir says in this article, he says China has been the first large middle income country already to sustain 2.5% plus growth with working age population declining. And this decline has started in 2015 and the decline now is 0.5% per year, right? It's a lot of people. So at this rate, it's going to be very tough for China to sustain even 2.5% growth. Now, in the very beginning, we had also told you that we'll also list for you some areas where data has also been shut out in India as well. And I have this list from our data reporter, Nikhil Rampal. I will also share one of his stories with you. In fact, I'll share 3 stories with you. One from Mint, one from Nikhil Rampal on the print, and one from the Hindu by R. Nagaraj and Rajeshwari Sen Gupta, who will illustrate some of the points that I'm making right now, because I will only mention these very briefly. So first is the census of 2021. So even if 2021 had the pandemic, in 2022, no work has been done on the census and doesn't look like there's any plan to do anything on 2023. So one big source of data will be missing, and a lot of the plans will now be made based on the data of 2011 census. How old were you in 2011? Think about it. Number 2, socio-economic caste census has not taken place, and even now we are relying on the data of the 2011 socio-economic caste census. This is very important. Although this data has not been released, but still the government is relying on it. And this data then also decides allocations for Ayushman Bharat, PM Awas Yojana and those schemes. Now looks like the government is saying, Nikhil tells me, that they may not even have an SECC again. They might merge it into some kind of a digital repository. Now what that means, I don't know. I'm sure you know more about digital technologies than I do. Number 3, Consumption Expenditure Survey, CES. Now CES of 2011 is still being employed because Consumer Expenditure Survey, after that, some data had come out. In fact, this was the leaked NSS report, which reporter Somesh Shah scooped in Business Standard. But government said that is not authentic, that is not verified. They withdrew the data and they slammed the doors shut. And since then, no data has come out of that post-2011 Consumption Expenditure Survey. What is it that Modi government might have got so upset about this data? That data showed or indicated that in Modi years, households were spending less on themselves, or they had less to spend on themselves. That was very contrary to the political discourse, and that's why that data was shut off. 4th is the price series data. Now, price series data is available till 2011-12 series. After that, we haven't got it. 2011-12 series was adopted in 2015. 2019 government said they will come up with an update, so they will adopt it to a series that came up in 2017-18. But that hasn't been done yet. Then government said we'll do the new price series data when the new CES, that is Consumption Expenditure Survey, and the Annual Survey of Industry, ASI, are concluded. Now ASI has been concluded, Annual Survey of Industry, but CES has not even yet begun, and there is very little chance, if any chance at all, that will come out before the 2024 election. And if we are caught in that situation, that such critical data, the consumption expenditure survey, which tells us, apart from other things, how much does a household has to spend on itself, how much does it have available, compared to 1 year back, 2 years back, 5 years back, 10 years back, most importantly, 8 years back or 9 years back. If that is not being done, then you can understand why there is such discomfort about holding that survey or in any case making that data public. So in conclusion, 2 lines of opinion. India is a much more open system than China. India will never go the way of Xi Jinping's China or even Bolsonaro's Brazil. And there will be correctives applied because no country benefits from hiding data. Because you know what happens? Data may bring bad news. Because if you hide bad news, then people start believing in rumors and people start making presumptions. So in this situation, the worst rumors sound the truest of all and the worst presumptions become the most convincing of all. That's not the situation any democratic country wants to put itself into because China cannot be our model.